Welcome, everyone, to our Bible study plan. We are going to be covering 3 chapters. I will be doing Micah chapters 5 through 7. Now, the basic book theme to going over and reviewing is that God judges sin and calls for justice. And Micah saw the coming judgment of Israel under the Assyrians, as well as the fall of Jerusalem and Judah under the Babylonians. And he is seeing the Jews, he's calling them out to come back to worship Jehovah and do their covenant. But they refused to listen. So the overview of this book of Micah, just to cover some ground that you've already probably known since you've been doing the other chapters, but I just want to say there are 3 primary messages. One, it's the warning of judgment, that judgment is coming, and that's in chapters 1 and 2 of Micah. And then the second message is that the Messiah is coming, and that's chapters 3 through 5. And then the third message of Micah is that the kingdom is coming, and that is chapters 6 through 7. So in my small time here with you, I am doing chapters 5 through 7. Now, chapter 5 is the promise of the coming of the Messiah, and this chapter is actually a continuation of the reading that you did yesterday of chapter 4. And so we have this promise of a deliverer coming. In verse 1 through 5 of chapter 5, we're talking about this coming Messiah, and Micah speaks of the Babylonian siege of Jerusalem. Now, King Zedekiah is captured, and the sons are killed, and King Z's eyes are pulled out, and he's taken to Babylon. And Bethlehem is the birthplace of Jesus, is mentioned in here. And I want to highlight verse 2, which says, "But you, Bethlehem Ephrath, though you are little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me the one to be ruler in Israel, whose going forth and from of old, from everlasting." This is an amazing prophecy that came to pass as the priests shared with the wise men who came to Jerusalem looking for the King of the Jews. That's mentioned in Matthew chapter 2 of 1 through 12. It's the pointing out of the Messiah born in the town of Bethlehem. Now, this prophecy is 700 years before Jesus was born. Amazing, this verse. And now we go into verse 5. "Then we shall raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 princely men." That is saying many shepherds and many leaders. And it's similar to a statement that Amos, in the book of Amos, made for 3 transgressions and for 4, which is in Amos chapter 1. Basically, God will raise up leaders to face the enemy, like God did in the life of David. But Micah is clear in this verse 6 that the Messiah is the deliverer. So we go into the 6th verse and all the way to the 15th. It's about God will defeat and clean up sin. Now, in chapters 6 through 7 of Micah, it goes into economic disasters, the sins of Israel, however, to trust God, and the kingdom is coming. So Micah 6. This is like a courtroom setting, and we see the Lord calling out the witnesses. Now in verse 1 through 8, it says, "In spite of your guilt, trust." So verse 1, we hear a lot about here, and a comment about verse 5. "The acacia grove to Gilead," that acacia grove is where Joshua was going into Jericho to Rahab. And this line is God reminding the people of Israel of the crossing of the Jordan River and entering into the promised land, like in Joshua chapters 3 and 4, and that God did for them what they couldn't do for themselves. They forgot to remember what God did for them. And this is why the Lord is calling out these witnesses. Remember, here, the key verse of 8 is, He has shown you, O man, what is good. What does the Lord require of you but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God? So Micah was pointing out that their guilt was to humbly repent and to turn to God to receive mercy, His justice. It points to God first before people. He has shown you. He is God. In verse 6 through 9, all the way to chapters 7 with verse 6, this is, in spite of your sentence, you must trust God. You need to trust God. So as we go into Micah chapter 7, there's a shift from verse 7 to 20, and this is on the focus of God's mercies. So verse 7, it starts out with, therefore. There's a shift from all the previous verses. Therefore, I will look to the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. Despite Israel's sufferings, it is God's character and His promise that brings hope. So the conclusion of this chapters are to trust in the Lord. Our guilt, our sentence is covered under the mercy of God. Look at God in providing us the Messiah, whose blood shed for us covers our guilt, our shame, and gives us mercy. The prophetic word came to pass in looking unto Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. Bye for now.